Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be talking about FY26 Title I summer programming. So if that's why you're here. You're in the right place. And we're going to get right started. So some general housekeeping. We're going to wait to answer questions until the end of the presentation. Feel free to use the chat feature to ask questions, or if you want to wait till the end and ask them verbally, you can come off mute at that time. This training will be recorded and it's going to live on our guidance page. Someone can drop that link in the chat, and it's going to be under Title I Summer. So some questions we'll answer today. What is the FY26 Title I Summer application? We'll go over the parameters and requirements for this grant. We'll talk about how we feed students during this summer grant. We'll talk about how you apply, what the deadlines are, what the process is for selecting who will and will not be funded. We're going to go over some of the fiscal information about how to request reimbursements and to avoid common errors, and share some key takeaways from previous summer programs, and then just some general contact information if you have questions about the grant. Okay, so what is Title I Summer Grant? So this is for Title I schools and Title I students. It's some additional funding to support summer programming and specifically academic intervention for those Title I students. The funding comes from a few different resources. When SAUs have to return funds to the state, return carryover funds, or funds for just other reasons under the Title I umbrella that get to be repurposed for this grant opportunity. I also want to note that this funding can be braided with other funding streams. So if you have special ed, extended year learning opportunities that are available, or just some other funding pockets. I know there's some immigrant education grants other districts apply for, but we welcome braiding of those funds. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'll have my contact information at the end. But we highly encourage braiding to make these programs sustainable. And we hope that these funds will help address summer learning loss for these Title I eligible students. The parameters. So again, as I've been referencing, only Title I students. This is a Title I specific grant. So Title I students, whether it's a targeted or school-wide program, only for summer services. It has the same Title I allowability restrictions as in your normal Title I year-long projects. Excuse me. The specific dates of this grant where you can purchase supplies and staff and all the things are May 1 to August 31. We get a lot of questions if you do get the grant about wanting to purchase supplies ahead of time. So starting on May 1, you can start with purchasing things for the grant. And as with all ESEA funding, it's got to be reasonable, allocable, and necessary. And again, we are only paying for budgeted items that support the summer programming. This is specific to summer programming. On the right-hand side here, you can see that there's just some parameters to make sure the program is nice and hearty. It can't be less than 4 weeks. It has to be at least 3 days per week. Oh, and it can't be more than 6 weeks. No more than 2 field trips. And the field trip must be aligned to that instructional program, must be academic, supporting academics, no less than 4 hours per day, no more than 6 hours per day, and at least 3 of those hours have to be instructional hours. So how do we feed these programs? We get this question a lot. Title I funds in general are not supposed to be used on food. And we just wanted to give you some resources that if you ask us about food, we'll point you to these resources. There is USDA child nutrition programs that can operate during the summer. So if you want to feed your students, we can get you in touch with someone on the nutrition team to help you access those resources. So there's also potentially a summer food service program, or in limited circumstances, a national school lunch program. And these are, again, programs to make sure that students eat at no cost. So you can work with your food service director. And again, if you have questions, reach out and we can put you in contact with who oversees that work. And then Title I summer reallocated funds should not be used in lieu of these programs. As you've heard in our ESEA office hours and other areas where we speak about food and ESEA funds, you can buy small food snacks that are used for instructional programming. Like we've seen that used for like math counting activities and things like that. But in general, you should not be purchasing food with these funds.
Great. So let's say you're an SAU with Title I schools, either targeted and school-wide, and you're interested in applying for these additional funds for the summer programs. Um, you need user access role. There is actually, because this is a separate grant that lives outside ESEA Consolidated, there is an actual address book role that is separate. I think it's called like Title I Summer Reallocation Director, something like that. So you need your user for that because they will be the ones that can actually change statuses for applications to submit those and to fill out the information. There's a page about contact information. We just ask for the best phone number. This grant, a lot of moving parts. And so sometimes the standard email or grants for me messaging is not effective enough for us to reach you. So we ask for your contact information so that these kinds of issues or anything with the grant can be resolved fairly quickly. Similarly to all sort of ESEA funds, we're looking to understand your highest needs. We're looking to make sure you're facilitating some kind of goal setting for your program. So where students begin the program and then where they end, there should be a clear goal outline for the instruction that's going to be provided through the summer months. And then, of course, outcomes. Similar, and I won't get too into this, there is a performance report at the end of this grant. And so we have you reporting on the outcomes of what happened over the summer. So how was your attendance? What gains did your students make? What was effective about your program. So it's its own grant, but we do full circle, close the loop to understand how those summer months went for the students. There's a project description. This is really important. We're looking for the dates of your program. If you recall, Jess mentioned the parameters. We're looking for it to be within those weeks, to have those days, to be substantial in hours of instructional improvement, geared towards those lowest performing students. So we're looking for the number of teachers you anticipate hiring for this program and the number of students you intend to serve. And then we do require a preliminary schedule. This is to ensure that the SAU and school that's facilitating it have a roadmap of what their days are going to be like, expectations for the educators that are hired. That shows us that the program is sort of clearly moving forward and is a viable program to fund. So those are some of the things that you'll be required to submit as part of your application to run the summer programming with Title I funding. You're also going to then have a budget request. The more detailed, the better. I can't emphasize that enough. These budget requests work slightly differently than your project-based budgets in the ESEA Consolidated. We're looking to understand the rate you're paying your teachers. We're understanding how many, what kinds, are they ed techs or educators? If you need somebody coordinating, you need to make sure that you tell us that that coordinator is not an administrator that would otherwise be working in the summer months, right? This is all supplemental funding. So unless we understand who these personnel are and their roles, we will be returning the application until the details that are provided are understanding enough to us that this is that supplemental program. So please, the more detailed, the better. I would say with supplies, right? You want to stick to academic supplies. You want to stick to highest needs. I know folks always asked about snacks and such. Consider reasonable and necessary. If a small snack is going to help the students perform academically, then it's most likely something that could be allowable. But everything has to be tied to their improvements in their academic needs. So you want to kind of avoid any incentives or things that don't tie into the goals for that student. So just be aware of that. This is a small, limited grant. And so the more things that probably could either be funded locally or are not necessary will be asked to be removed from the budget. So everything that you explain as having to need this in your budget, even if it's snacks, please be clear on why, and that it's all rooted in the high needs for those students academically, and under reasonable and necessary. So how do you apply? It is going to be a separate application through the Grants for Me platform. You have to navigate to the correct fiscal year, which will be 26. Uh, the title is going to be just Title I Summer Grant. I think we just got rid of reallocated because it's just a big word that's not necessary. It's your Title I Summer Grant that you're applying for. Draft started. Similarly, if you want it to be an editable application, you're going to have that user access role and you're going to be able to click draft started. It'll go through the workflow. So anybody who's currently listed as your fiscal rep for your business manager and who's currently listed as authorized representative, your superintendent, it's absolutely crucial that they have reviewed and read your budget requests and your project details prior to the deadline. If your application is stuck in workflow before the deadline or after the deadline, it will not be considered a submitted application. It is incredibly important that we understand that your entire district leadership is aware of this project, is understanding and on board with the budget requests. That is imperative. So the deadline will be Monday, March 31st. We almost always have it kind of right at the end of March so that April we can make those decisions in terms of who's being funded, et cetera. I just mentioned that, the workflow. Please be aware that if you're submitting draft complete on March 31st at 3:56 p.m., that you have your business manager and your superintendent on speed dial so that they are submitting that for you before 4 o'clock. Given just how limited it is, we are going to be really strict on this. And we were last year. We had to deny folks who were late, and it was upsetting for everybody. But it's just incredibly important that you guys realize why we have these deadlines and continue to follow them. So the period of performance is May 1st through August 31st. The liquidation is October 1st, and your performance report will be due a bit before your ESEA one. Performance report is a smaller amount, but you're still going to be reporting expenditures. You're going to be reporting on outcomes similarly, and finalizing the grant.
Before we get into funding this year, I do just want to be transparent in that we do have about a third to half of the funding that we had last year. So if we get the same amount of applicants, we will not be able to fund everyone. Um, all right, so into how the selection process funding works. We have reallocation procedures that are formalized that I'll have a colleague drop in the chat so you can look more thoroughly at those. Like Rita mentioned, only SAUs who submit by 4 o'clock on March 31 fully with that LEA authorized rep status will be considered. SAUs are prioritized and ranked in order, and those with the most points will get funded. And we'll go through those ranking metrics on the next slide. So again, they'll just be allocated based on who has the most points to who has the least points until we run out of funding. Um, we do want to note that every effort is made to fund these requests fully for everyone who applies on time. However, we may proportionally reduce awards to maximize the amount of SAUs served, if possible. Historically, when we oversee this grant, 15 to 25% of awarded funding has been left unspent. So that's why we've made those decisions in the past and may continue to take that caveat when it is most able to maximize SAUs doing programming. Okay, so the point system. So we have 4 different metrics we're looking at to give you all points. First is poverty level, and that will be based off the direct cert student count with a 1.6 multiplier over your enrollment. So that will give us your poverty percentage. This is from your October counts that you submit to and formalized through the data team in NEO. As you can see here, if you're at 90% poverty, you get 9 points, 80 to 89%, 8 points, and so on. Title I, as you know, is a high poverty grant. That is how the money is allocated. So that is our largest point factor in our ranking system. Next, we have Maine models of school support where you can get up to 5 points. You can get 5 points if you have an ATSI school, 3 points if you have a TSI, and 1 point if you have a CSI. And we decided to choose those metrics because TSI and ATSI do not have funding associated with them, whereas CSI schools do. Three is type 3 and 4 are both looking at carryover and the amount you've spent in both Title I summer grants in the past and in your ESEA grants overall. So if you've been spending down your funds, if you're on top of your spending, you will get more points here. So for item 3, we looked at last year's summer grant, and if you invoice for 100% of funds, you get 3 points. 95 to 99% of funds, 2 points. 9 94, 1 point. 89 or less, 0 points. We hope this also encourages funding programs that have been consistently funded in the past, as well as programs who have spent down funds. The last item is looking at ESEA funding spent. So we looked at your FY25 ESEA application, and if you had invoiced for everything, you get 3 points. If you had invoiced for 95 to 99% of invoices, and again, this is all titles 1 through 5 invoices, then you get 2 points. 94, 1 point. Um, and I had another item to, yeah, I guess that's it on that one. So again, 9 points, 5 points, 3 points, 3 points. So you have up to 20 points you can get in this ranking system.
Great question.
We're looking for FY25, the one that just recently had a performance report where you are at the 15-month mark and should be spending the funding the year they're awarded. So that's
Yes,
what
and that
we're
was, thank you, Rita. That was, sorry, Tara, before you jump in, that was what I was going to say, and I forgot, is we checked this as of Monday this week. So March 2nd is when we looked at where you were at with invoicing. So that's the cutoff point.
And spending is for SAU. We don't do it by school. That was a question in the chat as well. So it's your SAU aggregate average for poverty, for spending. Those are the data points that we have readily available.
And I know that there's some questions in the chat box. My apologies for cutting in, Tyra. In regards to access, we've become aware that due to a small naming convention that we made for this coming year, the username from last year is not transporting over. So right now you currently do not have access. It is open, but we are working on the back end to bulk load all the users from last year into this year. So please be patient with us as we work through that technical difficulty. We will have more information for you hopefully in the next day or so, just to be sure that we have everything open, and hopefully if not sooner.
And there will be a message that goes out that the application is open. So be aware either through Grants for Me and a priority notice or both. So you'll have multiple messages letting you know when the application is available.
Are we all set? All right, awesome. So now that you have received this award, it is vitally important that you realize that this is a special purpose grant. So when you need to track your expenses, it should be under a different account from your regular Title I. All reimbursement requests should only be for expenses incurred for the summer programming. This grant should not be used to pay teachers' salary in May. If they are doing planning for the summer programming outside of their contractual hours, then they could be reimbursed for time spent outside of their contractual day. Invoices for accrued salaries and benefits will not be payable using these grant funds. Accrued means earned but not paid. And obviously you will be paying the teachers as they do this work this summer. Expenses must be aligned to the application for funds. For example, you want to reimburse for transportation costs, but it is not indicated in your application and approved by the state program coordinator, then the invoice will be rejected. So please make sure that you put those details in your application. As always, all expenses need to be reasonable and necessary. All expenses must fall within the period of performance. So as you are planning the field trips or making sure no agreements are made before May 1st. That's very important. Last year, I received invoices for expenses in September, and those invoices needed to be returned. So just keep this in mind as you are planning your summer programming and invoicing. All invoicing will be done in grants from me. All requests for reimbursements must be accompanied by a detailed trial balance. This also can be known as an expenditure report or audit report, and it must be inclusive of the service period that you enter on your request page in Grants for Me. The trial balance should have a unique indicator that the expenses posted are for the summer grant, Title I summer grant. We must be able to identify the grant on the trial balance. In other words, I should not receive a regular Title I trial balance for these expenses. As the federal requirement, 2 CFR 200.302 states, the accounting system must be able to identify all federal awards received. Additional backup for supplies, travel, etc. includes invoices, receipts for services, or supplies purchased. Keep in mind, purchases cannot be made prior to May 1st. The last day to submit for reimbursement is going to be October 1st. So please get your invoicing in before October 1st. You need to have invoiced for all your expenses so that it will align with your performance report.
Okay, and lastly, before we jump into more questions that folks probably have, I want to thank everyone from last year who completed their performance reports on time, and took some energy and agency to really explain to me what was working in their programs. It's sometimes the only way I see what SAUs are saying about effective practices. So I just wanted to share that information back to folks on this call. Last year, best practices for Title I summer programs absolutely dealt with targeted academic instruction. With those real world experiences, folks would take students to museums after learning something in the classroom. Folks would go outside for experiential learning tied to science, or botany, for example, those kinds of skills, math. Very cool to see the creativity, the interdisciplinary work that's happening in the summer programs. A lot of folks mentioned that if students were not there, like common sense wise, that there was no real improvements, right? Attendance was absolutely the most important thing, to have those students there each day and engaged. Otherwise, the gains were not there. So obviously, when we talk about transportation and feeding through USDA, that's going to help the program sustain itself there. And obviously to create that culture around the importance of attending summer programming, because again, this is outside their normal school year. So how does a summer program be attractive or camp-like in order to sort of make students really excited to go and be there? Family engagement, I'm always so impressed by the level of family engagement work that's done for these shorter programs in the summer. Folks are constantly sending out newsletters, information, communications about their students' progress, inviting parents to be chaperones for field trips or showcases. There was one SAU that had showcases that were on different days in order to try to be flexible for parents to be involved in their students. I just saw an incredible level of detail and interest and introspection on how to really make family engagement work for the summer program. So continue to do that, especially because it seems to be really an effective practice. And then community partnerships. Sometimes the school year with everything going on, it's incredibly hard to stop and pause and bring in community members. I am also always very impressed to see the capacity that's built around community partnerships when it comes to author visits, programs coming in to the schools as opposed to those going out. If field trips are difficult, right? You have people come in for a day. We had folks that said they brought in their community leaders, like their firefighters, or to learn a technical skill. I'm amazed. And so, as obviously with limited funding, there's always difficulty to do these kinds of works, but we know, and you know, as SAU and school leaders, that these are the kinds of things that really make summer programs successful. So, thank you all for that work as you continue to facilitate these programs for your students.
And now we'll take questions. One question I did just want to address that I saw pop up quite a few times in the chat was around transportation. Transportation for Title I students can be covered in this grant. Other students can be included in this transportation if there's no additional cost. We get that one a lot. Yeah, we got a great question about anything you should bear in mind when braiding. I would say reach out to us if you have questions about this because it's really specific to how your program runs. With transportation, I know one particular district pays for transportation. They're a very large district, so they pay for transportation out of Title I and then email us about how they're meeting all of the other rationale for the grant. So depending on you know how you're choosing to blend, will really guide what kinds of like questions we would take on that. So just email us if you have questions about how you would like to blend or say them now. Yeah, Christine.
Good morning. Thank you, team, for all the information.